Welcome to Washington, D.C. Since the early 1800s, this city has been the capital of the United States. It's where the federal government does its work. And it's where students just like you come to see our historic monuments, museums, and parks. This year, we're bringing Washington, D.C. and some of its special places to you. One of those special places is where I am right now, the White House. I'm standing at the north front door, and here's a fun fact. Did you know that there's no back door to the White House? So whenever you walk in, whether it's north, south, east, or west doors, you're always walking in the front. And we've got a lot more fun facts in store for you during this Discovery Education virtual field trip, so that you and other students can go behind the scenes and learn more about our capital city, the city of us.
What do you think about when you picture Washington, D.C.?
How about the President of the United States?
How about Congress and the Supreme Court?
How about all of the monuments to famous Americans?
How about all of the fun things you can see in the museums?
Cherry blossoms and fireworks on the 4th of July? Even that ceremony every Thanksgiving when the president pardons a turkey.
Washington, D.C. is all of these things and a whole lot more.
Did you know that Washington, D.C. isn't the only capital we've had? New York City and Philadelphia were also capitals of the United States before it moved to Washington, D.C.
Did you also know that Washington, D.C. isn't a state? It's a federal district, the District of Columbia, which is what the D.C. stands for. During the City of Us virtual field trip, we're going behind the scenes to 6 special places in and around Washington, D.C. that people of all ages love to see when they visit.
Along the way, we're also going to answer some of the questions you may have about these places. So let's head to our first stop, the White House.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is one of the most famous addresses in the world.
Do you know how the White House got its name? Well, a popular legend is that white paint was used to cover up burn marks on the building after British soldiers set fire to it during the War of 1812.
The true story is that the building was covered with a special type of whitewash paint to protect the stone exterior from moisture and cracking during winter freezes.
Over the years, people began describing the building as the White House, but it wasn't until 1901 that President Theodore Roosevelt officially named it the White House.
The White House is huge. It has 6 floors, 132 rooms, 28 fireplaces, and 4 kitchens. There's also a swimming pool, tennis court, movie theater, and even a bowling alley. As you wind through these hallways and rooms, you not only see paintings, sculptures, and other priceless objects, you also get a sense of just how much history has happened here.
Like the East Room, which has been the setting for countless presidential speeches, concerts, and other important ceremonies through the years.
Or the State Dining Room, where presidents throw fancy parties for leaders from other countries. As many as 140 guests can be seated here for dinner. Now those 4 kitchens make a lot more sense.
Many of the rooms are named for the color they're painted, like the blue room, red room, green room, and yellow room. Which brings us to our first question.
Hi, my name's Olivia and I'm in the 6th grade. Dr. Biden, do you have a favorite room in the White House?
Thank you for your question. You know, there are many, many special rooms in the White House, but I want to show you one that's really interesting. So follow me. Here we are in the blue room, and it's called the blue room because everything in here is blue. The furniture is blue, the draperies are blue, the rug is blue, the upholstery is blue. You can see how beautiful this is. So one thing that you might notice is that the shape of this room is an oval. So if you can see it as the camera follows around. And you know, there are 4 rooms in the White House that are oval rooms. There's this room, there's one room above, There's one room below this, and that's called the diplomatic room because it's where we receive diplomats. And of course, there's the famous Oval Room, the Oval Office where the president works. The Blue Room is used mainly for receptions or receiving guests. But one thing that we do that makes this room even more special is that every year the Christmas tree is in this room. The Christmas tree is placed right here, but if you look above, there's a chandelier. So they take the chandelier down and then they use the electric that they use for the chandelier to light the Christmas tree. There's a lot of history in this room. There are a lot of antiques. And if you notice the paintings on the wall, some of the antiques here by the fireplace, the vases. The president and I aren't really afraid of breaking anything, but you know, we do have 2 dogs, and sometimes they can be seen running through the hallway, so we have to be careful with them. Well, I've saved the best for last, so I want you to come with me as I take you outside to the balcony. I want to show you the view. So as you can see in the distance is the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. It's one of the most beautiful views in all of the city. Think of how many presidents have stood in this very spot and looked out. And this is where my husband Joe and I stood the night of his inauguration to see the fireworks, and we felt so welcomed into office.
The U.S. Capitol, 2 miles up Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House, is the next stop on the City of Us virtual field trip.
With its massive cast iron dome weighing almost 9 million pounds, it's one of the most recognizable government buildings in the world. It's also home to the legislative branch of our government.
When our country's founders wrote the U.S. Constitution, they divided the government into 3 branches. Under a system called checks and balances, each branch was given special powers that allow it to block or check the other 2 branches. The system makes sure no branch becomes too powerful and keeps the government in balance.
The legislative branch, or Congress, makes the laws. The executive branch, or presidency, enforces them. And the judicial branch, including the Supreme Court, judges whether they're fair or not.
Congress itself has 2 parts. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state.
The House of Representatives has 435 voting members. The size of each state's population determines how many representatives it gets. Both the House and Senate have to vote in favor of a law for it to be sent to the president.
Before we head inside, let's take our next student question, which is about the Capitol Dome.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'm in 7th grade. What is the small statue on top of the Capitol Dome?
Well, thank you for your question. That statue may look small from the ground, but that statue is 19.5 feet tall, weighs 15,000 pounds, and is made of bronze. The statue is called the Statue of Freedom. The Statue of Freedom is symbolic. It is symbolic of the freedom that we depend on in our country, that is a foundation of our country. That complicated headdress was not in the original design. The original design had a simple freedman's cap, which is what they used in ancient Rome to indicate that a person who had been formerly enslaved was free. But at the time this was designed, the Secretary of War did not want the symbol of a freed, enslaved person to be on the top of the Capitol. Now there's more to the story. The metalworker, who was the principal person who made it, Philip Reed, was an enslaved person when he started to build the Statue of Freedom. During the time that he was building it, he was granted his freedom when President Lincoln freed the enslaved people in Washington, D.C., 7 months before he was finished. So for those last 7 months of building the Statue of Freedom, Philip Reed was paid for his labor. So now we're inside the dome. When you look from outside, you see that dome. Now you can see what's inside. Inside is the Capitol Rotunda. I want you to look up and see the apotheosis of Washington. This is a painting that elevates Washington. You look to either side. He has freedom on one side and victory on the other side. And on the side of freedom, freedom holds the Constitution. On the side of victory, victory has the trumpet of victory, trumpeting the victory of this new country. And surrounding George Washington are 13 women representing the original 13 states. It's an incredible statement of unity and freedom. The Freedman's Cap appears in the apotheosis. Even though it didn't appear on the Statue of Freedom on top of the building, it is right there inside the building. Because it was put there by the artist, Constantino Bermudi. He wanted everybody to know that the concept of freedom was going to last in this country forever. It is our most sacred space. Here in the Rotunda, we come together at times of great tragedy when we have people laying in state. And the honor to lay in state in the Rotunda has only been given to 41 people in the history of the country. Presidents, great dignitaries. We also are here where the Congressional Gold Medal is given. So at a time of great celebration and honor, we come together in the Rotunda. Below us is the crypt. The crypt means a burial place, which would make you wonder who's buried there. Actually, no one. It was built to be George Washington's burial place. However, it wasn't completed until 25 years after his death, and he was buried at Mount Vernon, and his family wanted to keep his body at his home. And in the very center of the crypt, there is a compass star, which is the geographical center of Washington, D.C. Did you know that George Washington and Pierre L'Enfant chose the location of the Capitol? They chose it because it was up on a hill, because it was the center of the city, because they believed that the legislative branch, Article 1 of our Constitution, was the most important branch. And they wanted the Capitol building to dominate this incredible new city that they were planning. And so the very center of the Capitol is the very center of the city. So thank you so much for your question. I am so happy to share the stories. I hope you'll get to come in person because this building belongs to you.
Just a short walk from the Capitol is the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court.
In a typical courtroom, there's just one judge making sure things run properly. On the Supreme Court, there are 9 judges, called justices.
Justices hear about 80 cases every year, out of as many as 8,000 that are considered.
Which ones get picked? In order for any case to make it to the Supreme Court, a minimum of 4 of the 9 justices have to want to hear it. This is called the Rule of 4.
It's important to remember that the Supreme Court doesn't make laws. It offers opinions on whether they're fair or not.
The justices listen to lawyers argue their sides of a case, and when 5 or more agree, their opinion becomes the majority opinion. Justices are appointed to the Supreme Court for a lifetime term, meaning they can do this important job for as long as they want.
The Supreme Court has become more diverse over the years. In 1916, Louis Brandeis became the first justice who was Jewish.
51 years later, Thurgood Marshall was the first Black justice appointed to the court. Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to serve on the court in 1981. And Sonia Sotomayor, appointed in 2009, was the first justice who was Hispanic. Let's go to our next student question.
Hi, my name is Dominic, and I am in 10th grade. How does a person get to become a Supreme Court justice?
That's a really great question, and it's actually pretty hard to become a Supreme Court justice. There are 3 basic steps. First, there has to be an opening or a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can only have 9 people on it at a time. after a vacancy happens, it's up to the president to pick someone through a process called nomination. And then it's up to the Senate to vote on the nominee the president has selected. The decisions that the Supreme Court justices make are very important. They affect everyone in the entire country. I had the privilege of being a law clerk to Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Justice Sotomayor is one of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And every year, she hires some young lawyers like myself to work with her on the Supreme Court as what are called law clerks. Law clerks help the justices write their decisions, what are called judicial opinions, and also to do research and to get ready to hear the cases that are brought before the Supreme Court. Being a law clerk is a wonderful experience. It was the highlight of my working career, the best job I ever had.
Everywhere you go in Washington, D.C., you'll see statues, monuments, and memorials to some of the most important people in U.S. history.
One of the most visible is the Washington Monument. It's the world's tallest stone structure and tallest obelisk, a type of 4-sided monument.
One of the most sacred is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which lists every name of the nearly 60,000 Americans who died during the Vietnam War.
One of the most visited is the Lincoln Memorial, which looks like a Greek temple and has a statue of President Abraham Lincoln that's 19 feet tall. You can see an image of it on the back of a penny or a $5 bill.
Over the years, the Lincoln Memorial has been a symbolic spot for civil rights protests and marches. You can even stand in the exact spot where one of the most famous speeches in U.S. history was given during the 1963 March on Washington.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Just a 10-minute walk from here is another memorial. It's dedicated to the man who delivered the "I Have a Dream" speech. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a key leader of the civil rights movement in our country from the 1950s until his assassination in 1968.
His memorial is one of the newest in Washington, D.C., and we're excited about the student who's asking the next question.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Renee King, and I'm Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter. I've been to Washington, D.C. a bunch of times, and I've always wondered, who decides who gets a memorial there and where it goes?
For the answer, we went to the Department of the Interior, the government agency that manages most federal lands, including the MLK Memorial.
Secretary Deb Haaland isn't just the head of the Department of the Interior. She's also a member of the Laguna Pueblo and the first Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary in U.S. history.
Hi, Yolanda. Thanks for your great question. There's actually a federal law that guides the process for adding new memorials to the national park system, including those here at the National Mall. Believe it or not, there's a 24-step process to go through from the original concept to dedication of a new memorial, and it involves Congress, the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, and other government organizations. The design of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial was inspired by a line in Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, where he said, "With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope." The memorial depicts a 30-foot-high sculpture of Dr. King, a literal and figurative stone of hope, standing forward of 2 other pieces of granite that symbolize the mountain of despair. The sculpture of Dr. King is unfinished, much like the history of civil rights in this country.
For the next stop, we're going across the Potomac River and into Virginia to visit the tomb of the unknown soldier.
The tomb is in Arlington National Cemetery, the place where we honor people who have served in the U.S. military.
Founded in 1864 during the Civil War, this cemetery holds the graves of service members who have served in every U.S. war since the American Revolution. About 400,000 people are buried here.
That may sound like a lot, but Arlington actually has some of the strictest burial requirements of any U.S. national cemetery. Only certain members of the military are allowed to be buried here.
Funerals at this cemetery are unique, and some can involve a horse-drawn cart, a 3-rifle volley, the folding and presentation of the U.S. flag, and the playing of taps, a somber 24-note bugle call.
Memorial Day weekend is an emotional time here. American flags are placed at more than 230,000 grave sites. Countless other people also visit to remember loved ones and pay respect.
Throughout the year, people come to see the special grave site and eternal flame for President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963. This flame is meant to burn forever.
They also visit the tomb of the unknown soldier, which holds the graves of 3 unidentified service members, one each from World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. The tomb represents the sacrifices of our military heroes.
Soldiers guard the tomb 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. In snow, rain, or deep into the night, a soldier marches back and forth in a precise way. When guards change shifts, there's even a white glove inspection of every part of the soldier's rifle.
Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I'm in 6th grade. Why can't we use science to figure out who is buried in the tomb of the unknown soldier?
Science can help us solve a lot of questions, such as some of the unknown soldiers from later wars. As an example, the Vietnam War. However, when we think about unknown soldiers from earlier wars, like World War I, which was a really long time ago, it's much more difficult to find the specific kinds of DNA matches to enable those identifications to occur. And I think it's also really important to remember that the intention of the tomb was to enable these unknown service members to rest in peace forever, in a spot where they would be honored without the possibility of ever being identified.
The changing of the guard is a ceremony which is supposed to symbolize an army funeral. And the reason that we continuously do this ceremony is so that we can pay respects to the unknowns at all hours and at all minutes of every day. And during the guard change, everything that I do for those who gave their life, for those who came before me, and for those veterans who fought so that you and I could be free today.
Time for our last stop. No field trip to DC is complete without a visit to the Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian Institution is huge. They have 19 different museums and a zoo. And all of that is totally free to the public. Oh, and their headquarters are in a castle.
Wait, did you say 19 museums? That's amazing! They must have so much stuff!
They do! Their collection has millions and millions of objects to see and learn about. Movie props, amazing art, huge fossils, even uniforms worn by famous athletes. Their zoo is also one of the few places in America where you can see giant pandas. Whatever you're interested in, they probably got it.
How about airplanes and space exploration?
Oh, they definitely have you covered there. The Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum has the largest collection of aviation and space artifacts in the world, and it's so big that it has 2 locations.
Hi, my name is Kalia, and I'm in the 7th grade. What can I see in the Air and Space Museum that I can't see anywhere else?
The mission of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum is to celebrate and commemorate the nation's aviation and spaceflight history. This is one of the most popular museums in the entire world. We have lots of really interesting things to see here, and when you look around, you'll be amazed. We've got some really popular things to see here, including some of the fastest aircraft, the SR-71 Blackbird and the Concorde. But I think the most popular thing here is my favorite exhibit, the Space Shuttle Discovery. There are only 4 space shuttles in the world, and this is one of the places you can see one. The Space Shuttle Discovery is one of 3 remaining flown space shuttles. That means it went all the way to space and came back 39 times. And that took it 365 days. So the Space Shuttle Discovery has an incredible amount of experience in space. If you've heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, this is the shuttle that took it to space. When Discovery's mission was complete, it was in Florida. So how did we get it from Florida to Washington, D.C.? It had to be put on the back of a special aircraft and then flown here. That is not something you see every day. If you're anything like me, you know that your imagination can take you to amazing places, even those far, far away. Right now, we are restoring Poe Dameron's X-Wing from The Rise of Skywalker. And when it's finished, we'll be putting it on display in our museum. This is an amazing example of how Hollywood and our imaginations can take us to amazing places and inspire us to do even more amazing things. This museum can tell the American story in a very unique way. We have all kinds of really awesome things for you to see when you come to visit.
I can't believe our virtual field trip is almost over.
We sure did a lot. The Air and Space Museum, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the MLK Memorial,
plus the Supreme Court, U.S. Capitol, and White House. We also learned a lot about why all of these places are important to Washington, D.C. and to the nation.
Thank you to all the students who provided questions and all of the experts who answered them.
But wait, don't go yet. A very special person has a message for all of the students who are watching.
Being First Lady of the United States is the honor of a lifetime. I'm grateful for every moment I get to serve the incredible people of this country. I also cherish the time I get to spend with students like you. I've been a classroom teacher for more than 30 years, and if there's one thing I know for certain, it's that you are the key to our country's future. So please stay curious, keep asking questions, learn about the issues that are important to you, and know how much your voice matters. As we just learned in this Discovery Education virtual field trip, we're lucky to live in a country with a capital city as beautiful and historic as Washington, D.C. It truly is the city of us.